Good evening, class. Sometimes in the legal system, they mess up. In the last 35 years in the U.S., more than 1,000 people have been executed by capital punishment. Even the ones who did deserve to die on death row, what did killing them really accomplish? I'm here today to argue that capital punishment is an ineffective way to deal with our criminals. My reasons are that the legal representation is unfair, the death penalty fails to deter crime, and that the death penalty is more costly than life imprisonment. First, the legal representation in the courtroom is unfair. According to a study conducted by the American Civil Liberties Union, almost all defendants who face capital charges cannot afford an attorney and rely on the state to appoint one for them. Because of this, defense attorneys are often overworked, underpaid, and lack the necessary experience to handle a death penalty case. Appointed attorneys often also lack the discipline to represent their clients. The Seattle Post-Intelligencer reports that in Washington state, 1 in 5 of the 84 people who have faced execution in the past 20 years were represented by lawyers who had been or were later disbarred, suspended, or arrested. Overall, the state's disbarment rate for attorneys is less than 1%. The Dallas Morning News examined 461 capital cases and found that nearly 1 in 4 condemned inmates has been represented at a trial by court-appointed attorneys who have been disciplined for professional misconduct at some point in their careers. It's pretty hard to win a case when a criminal is the one defending you. As one can see, the defendants of death penalty cases are represented inadequately for a proper trial. Next, the death penalty fails to deter crime. The New York Times reports that 10 of 12 states without the death penalty have homicide rates below the national average, whereas half the states with the death penalty have homicide rates above. So states with the death penalty tend to have higher rates of people killing each other than those without. This can be supported by the records at deathpenaltyinfo.org, which shows us that the murder rate in non-death penalty cases was as much as 46% lower than in death penalty states. The murder rate has declined almost every year for both death penalty and non-death penalty states. However, the non-death penalty states have averaged a lower homicide rate every single time. This implies that the death penalty is doing the opposite of what it was intended to do and is instead raising crime rates. Lastly, the death penalty is more costly than life imprisonment. Expert Jay Sullivan of Seattle University, who conducted a study on the economic costs of seeking the death penalty, said that in a Washington study, the death penalty case cost an average of $1 million more than in a similar case where the death penalty was not sought. Defense costs were about 3 times as high in death penalty cases, and prosecution costs were as much as 4 times higher than those of non-death penalty cases. In Washington, it costs about $3 million for the death penalty, while life imprisonment is about $2 million. A report from the Judicial Council of the Kansas legislators supports this, stating that after examining 34 potential death penalty cases from 2004 to 2011, the study found that defense costs for the death penalty trials averaged $395,000 per case compared to the $99,000 per case when the death penalty was not sought. Costs incurred by the trial court showed a similar disparity. $72,000 for cases with the death penalty, $21,000 for those without. Prisoners on death row also cost twice as much more per year, $49,000. As for the prisoners in the general population, $25,000. From these studies, we can take away that the death penalty cost is significantly greater than the cost of life imprisonment. The death penalty is useless. The statistics have shown us that people are going to get wrongly convicted, crime rates will get worse, and the U.S. is going to spend more money in the process. So, in conclusion, capital punishment is ineffective, and it is an ineffective way to deal with criminals. My reasons are that the legal representation is unfair, the death penalty fails to deter crime, and that the death penalty is more costly than life imprisonment.
All right, the proposition's clearly identified. There's a good layout of the secondary points. I think you're rushing a little bit there. The first of the supporting points is phrased like a value proposition. That's problematic. I do think it's actually a claim of fact that's being made here, that there is some problem with the representation or the system that exists in representing people who are accused of capital cases. I think that's a better way of phrasing it than the argument about whether or not it's fair. The idea of fairness sounds like a value inference that you're making. So I'd be a little bit careful about that. Your internal signposts were relatively clear. I think your transitions could be a little bit smoother because it makes it sound a little mechanical, like you're going through a checklist of things rather than making a cogent argument that's going to be convincing. You don't want to sound like the brochure page from the Death Penalty Information Center. You want to make an argument that you think is pretty strong. However, I thought you had a lot of good information in the speech. You did a very good job citing the sources in the presentation. I'd be a little bit careful about some of the inferences that are being made that were not supported. You had an inference about innocent people being executed or being convicted. There's a question about whether or not they were adequately represented. I think there's some other questions there that need to be, you need some extra proof on the argument about whether or not they were innocent in the first place. And then there's another inference that I'd be a little bit careful about making the inference that because of the statistical relationship that the death penalty is having the opposite result, promoting death. I think that's a stronger argument that would need additional information on it than what you've got here. What you have, though, does respond to the point of deterrence. All right, thank you.